Today, we are going to dive into the canvas. We're going to generate some content and manipulate it, edit it, try to get it to be kind of what we want it to look like and how we want it to look and feel. Primarily, the goal for us is going to be creating kind of realistic imagery, more architectural focus, just kind of like of spaces, and kind of really solve for some of the problems that we've seen in older generations of models where there are, squiggly lines or things don't look exactly as high fidelity as you'd hope. We're going to use the canvas and a lot of the features to dig in on that. So I'll call out a couple of things that I'm using right now just so that people can see what I've got set. I'm using RealVisXL, which is kind of a more realistic, photorealistic model. I'm also using Ismail's Nunu XL, which is just kind of like a little bit of a flare from an architectural perspective. We are going to jump in and just start generating some things. Cool. Let's just generate something. Let's get some pictures generated. Someone asked, is this SDXL? This is SDXL. We're going to use SDXL to generate the base today. And part of the reason for that is speed. You can iterate in concept speed-wise. Part of it is just having a little bit more control over inpainting and things like that. Flux is a little bit harder to inpaint. We'll talk about Flux inpainting a little bit later as well. But overall, it's going to be using SDXL for kind of the core base concept. So we've got this kind of like bold visual aesthetic. Somebody said, interesting that we're going the route of trying SDXL as a better base image. I think the real question is, are you relying on text only for the base image? Or is that what you're looking for? Or, I think this is probably, as a pure text to image generation, probably worse than what we would get from Flux. But with SDXL, we can do some things like, let's say, throw in some control layers. So we'll do a depth control layer with something like this space. So we'll bring that in as a control layer. I'll change this to depth, and we'll filter it to get the depth pre-processing. So we got that. We're good there. We'll fit the bounding box to our layers and kind of reposition ourselves here. So now we can generate this, but what we can also do is bring in something like we'll bring in a global reference image. So I'm using IP adapter, and I'm using the style of something else to kind of guide this generation. I maybe will bring that down a little bit. So I've got structure and composition coming from something else. If I was to be using this in a professional workflow, I might be starting from a sketch. I might be starting from a rendering. Both of these things are tools that you can use in your toolkit. So we'll go ahead and generate using this IP adapter and this depth control net just to see kind of what we get here. But effectively what we've done is taken the style of one image, taken the visual composition of another, and we're using SDXL primarily to render that and provide a lot of the visual content. I think the power of using SDXL is primarily just that there are fine tunes that pull a lot of this information in that you might not have with a Flux dev yet. But as we can see, we've kind of got this interior hallway kind of lobby of a luxury hotel. This gives us kind of our initial base. Now, there are things that we don't like in this image that we wouldn't want to have come out. I'm going to hide our control layer here and basically just fix some of these things. So I'm going to kind of get these lights out of the way. I'm just going to kind of paint over those, and then we'll inpaint those. So I'm just going to kind of fix these up. I'm not worried about some of the smaller details because I think those will come or get fixed when we do something with Flux in just a moment. But for the most time here, we are, somebody did call out that my negative prompt has photo in here, which we don't want. We want painting and negative prompt. That's why we're getting a little bit of this kind of blurry effect. Maybe we'll also add blurry to our negative prompt and do another generation there. I'm going to turn this down just a little bit more because I think we are getting more of these lights in than I would like. I really want to keep that. Oh yeah. So now we've got kind of an initial base here, and the composition kind of matches what we were going for. Obviously we don't have a pool, but we did pick up some of the style. There's kind of like the white. I'll just bring this in as a raster layer so we can kind of look at it. We've got like the whites and the woods and things like that. It's pulling in the pool, but that's because we're doing kind of a lobby, so that's good. Now the thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my model to Flux Dev. And this is the quantized version. We'll have to get rid of our IP adapter and our control layer for now. Those are still in the process of being implemented in, but we really don't need it for what we're about to do. I am going to call out the optimized image to image setting. This may be off for you by default, depending on if you've set it on or not. But when you want to use it, you can turn it on. What optimized image to image is going to do is it's going to apply a different kind of scale to the denoising strength process. If you try doing image to image or inpainting with Flux, what you'll find by default is that it's very resistant to doing any type of transformation using image to image. There's a range where we have found kind of like if we scale it to that, we can really get it to act a little bit more like SDXL. And so when you have this on, it is just applying a little bit of a different denoise strength scale that we've kind of tested and tuned. And it will work a little bit more along the scale that you'd be expecting with something like SDXL. So I'm going to turn this to optimized image to image, and we'll do a generation at about 0.5. What that'll do is it will take the core elements of this image, but it will significantly transform some of the smaller details. And that's actually what we want. If we look at some of the details inside of SDXL, especially when there are a lot of straight lines, what you'll find is that there's kind of like smaller details off in the distance that aren't straight, aren't perfect, and look a little bit off or funky. This one's 0.5, and so we are definitely getting a little bit of a different composition here. We'll probably do another one at maybe 0.3, just to kind of draw that comparison. So we're doing another one here at 0.3. And just for pure comparison, we'll do another one at 0.15. And again, this is not the same as a 0.15 on SDXL. It's a broader scale that we've kind of tuned for Flux specifically. But it'll be good to kind of show you the range here when we're using this optimized image to image, how it operates and kind of where it works. So this is our 0.15, and you can see that it, compared to our original, keeps a lot of the structure. It has added a series of like light fixtures on the top, right? That are somewhat evenly spaced. There's still a little bit of squiggly lines from the original in there. It didn't kind of deviate as much from those. But if you look in the distance, we've got some materials that have, I would say, been transformed and kind of cleaned up to match more of the aesthetic of what we're going for. This is the lowest denoise strength. If we go to the higher denoise strength, we can see that it is reinterpreting a lot of these details. It's got elements that it's adding in, it's straightening up things like the elements on the roof. It's kind of cleaning that up. And if we go to the highest denoise strength, you can see that it really is just reinterpreting the space completely, rather than having this kind of like center lit up sitting area, which, you know, arguably is questionable in general. We've got kind of this open seating space. We can kind of see how it has interpreted the same room or the same space visually. And so this is kind of an interesting way to get different visual concepts and elements that you can then evaluate, use, and test out. It's a really good way of getting different materials in and playing around with kind of the potential of a certain space. I think one of the things that I'll specifically call out here is with Flux, control nets are right around the corner. The control nets will behave a little bit differently than previous generation control nets. It's good to just kind of like recognize that every generation of models has its own specific capabilities and specific way of interpreting your prompt and the additional information inside of it. So with Flux specifically, right now, we're primarily operating on pure image to image. We're not doing controls. We're not doing anything other than just kind of using the raw image data itself. Now, if we want to play around with the base image and kind of see what happens when we add elements in, we can do that. What I might play around with is maybe take this and see if we can add some additional palm trees inside of this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the raster layer. I'm going to turn off everything except the top layer for the purposes of erasing. And I'm just going to kind of like add in this palm tree in a couple of different spots. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. I'm not going to try to be perfect. I'm just going to get it to be closer to what I want. And I think that looks pretty good. So we'll turn on the other things here, and I will take this and move it around. When you're dragging it, it will snap to the grid as of the latest version. If you want it to move kind of more fluidly, you hold down the control key while you're dragging it around. We're going to take that over there, and we're going to make a palm tree on that side. If I want to kind of like give it a little bit of a look, it's different. I can kind of do some transform there, so it's not exactly the same palm tree. And then we're going to do that maybe 2 more times. We'll get 2 more versions of this. And what I'm going to do is transform that into a larger, nearer to the camera palm tree. And actually, I'll just duplicate this guy and move this guy over here and do some transform. Maybe we'll flip it and then put that over here and apply that. Okay, so now we've got like palm trees where we want them to be. Now what we can do is we can inpaint just those areas. So we'll inpaint these palm trees here. The interesting thing about Flux when you're doing inpainting is that you can really, I would say, in a lot of ways, as long as it's in the prompt. And so we'll do, you know, palm trees, interior palm trees. You can get away with pretty high denoising strength. So we'll try 0.6 here and see what we get. So a lot of questions on Discord stuff, like whether we should move to Twitch and do live streams on Twitch. Maybe. I think the question came up of when will we have a magic wand? We will probably be doing some features around auto masking in an update that's pretty soon, and that'll be helpful. So we can see that it is generating our inpainting here. It's a little bit too small of a palm tree, or it's a different style. I guess these two are fine. This one matches and this one matches. But you know, we can see that it's been inpainted in, and it kind of matches the aesthetic of this room. So you know, by inpainting those, we're now have a symmetrical scene. It's a little bit more fleshed out. If we want to, we can kind of come in and draw some things. We'll say, I haven't done a lot of drawing in Flux, but we're going to try it. So I'm going to take some of this brown here, and I'm just going to kind of do a table over here and over here. And I'm just doing kind of like rough colors here because I don't really anticipate that I'm using a whole lot of specific detail. I just kind of want to get this general structure in place. And then we'll inpaint these areas and let it imagine those. Is there a way to prevent it from generating stuff outside of the border? I need to turn down the denoising strength on this one. Is there a way to prevent it from generating stuff outside the border? Maybe you can clarify what you mean by generating stuff outside the border. That might help me answer your question. Look at the left palm tree. I'll look at the left palm tree momentarily here. Once it's finished. So it's added these kind of like modern tables. At the higher denoising strength, it was definitely it just kind of added that into the background. It's a little bit closer to where I wanted here, but this looks stylistically not exactly what I was going for, but you know, again, we'll not be too choosy. On this palm tree, are you talking about this lamp right here? This one? So somebody asked about this adding the lamp. If we go back and look at where I inpainted, it likely did have that section in the inpainting mask. So when I selected it, it was probably something like this. And so you can see that that area is included there. The way to solve for that would be if we saw that and we didn't like it, you know, we can go in and delete it. The other piece is we can actually come in, if we see something like that and we know which generation it came from, we can actually go in and see all of the history of our raster layers directly on the right-hand side. So we can kind of go back through time just by turning off these raster layers and seeing what got changed where. So we can see that that lamp came in, right, during this generation. If we want to, and, you know, have the desire to, we can come in and erase that out and inpaint it in, right? So we can kind of erase what was added. We can see that underneath this one, there are these old palm trees. So we can delete those old palm trees because we don't need those anymore. So we could just come in and, you know, erase that out and clean it up if we want to, and then re-inpaint that if we want the old wall there. So like, because all of the layers are there and we have that history, we can go in and tweak it and modify it and pull it back to an earlier state in specific regions. It's really just kind of a function of what did you mask, when did you mask it, and how do you want to get to that final image. So now we've got this. We'll turn our tables back on, and maybe we want to prompt for these coffee tables in a bold visual. So we'll do this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our inpaint mask. I'm going to do scaled generation, and I'm going to scale this area here and regenerate that coffee table. Now, something that I've cited in the past is that if you're doing this type of regeneration at a small scale and there are pairs of objects, so in this case we have a coffee table here and a coffee table on the other side that we want to get out of it, there is a risk if we do the inpainting separately that those will be in a different style. Typically, if you have pairs, if you're doing somebody's eyes, ears, if you're doing objects that should be somewhat mirrored in some way, you typically want to do that in the same inpainting process. And that's going to be how you get kind of the style to match, the overall look and feel of that to match. We'll play with that here and see what we can do once we get this. I actually like that. That looks pretty cool. It's like a nice little thing on the side. I'm going to take that. Now the question is, how do we get this over and matched on the other side? What I'm going to try doing is I'll duplicate this, bring it over and transform it. And then we will clean that up and try inpainting it in with a very low strength. And that's going to be how we try to work around it on this side. Whoops, need to move our bounding box over here. So we're going to take that out, that part out, and try to match this up as best we can. We brush some stuff in here to kind of fill in the right color. And we'll just inpaint this with a low strength. And that'll kind of give us that mirrored look, matches the style. It's a little bit more aligned. We've kind of composed it ourselves. I'm noticing now that I didn't particularly compose it perfectly symmetrically, but it'll work for our intents and purposes here. And now we've got something that's kind of similarly styled on the other side and matches it a little bit more. And we can kind of accept that and pull back out. So now we've got this kind of like visual space that we can use and kind of modify. So we'll call that our interior. Now what I want to do is kind of move to the outside. So we'll save this, just to kind of have the history there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have two reference images at the same time. I'm going to move to our RealViz model here. And we'll switch this to our IP adapter and maybe just do style only for both of these at about 0.6. And I'm going to say visual aesthetic for a luxury hotel exterior, poolside. Yeah, we'll like that. Desert themed hotel, like that too. We'll change the aspect ratio here to be a little bit wider, something like that. And we'll get an image. We'll see what we start with. Go from there. Play it by ear. It's going to reload that model. So we'll wait for a moment here. And it is also loading both of those IP adapters. Okay, we've got like an interesting kind of pool aesthetic. I like the color of this. It looks pretty cool. We can figure out if we like anything or don't like anything structurally here. There are some things I don't particularly like, specifically around like the layout being a little bit off from a symmetrical perspective. So maybe I'll fix that and then we'll run image to image. So I'm going to duplicate this again and turn off the background so that I can fix what I don't like. I'm going to fix this right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to be a little bit more centered. That's what gets me kind of frustrated with this. So we'll fix that, kind of brush that in, and now it's a little bit more aligned with kind of like where I would expect things to be. And then what I can do now is run Flux on this. And so we'll again do a couple of different passes on this. We got to remove our IP adapters when we switch to Flux. We're going to do a couple of passes here. I'm going to even do one that's kind of like a lot higher just to see what comes out the other side, because I do think it'll be interesting to see what it interprets with this even at higher strengths. High ceilings is probably something that shouldn't be in the prompt anymore. You could call the sky the highest ceiling of all, but it might be weird. We'll see. We can already see that like structurally though, it's like keeping a lot when the strength is low. It's keeping a lot of the placement of things. And this is where if we don't have things in the right place in a way that we kind of want to see it, it'll definitely influence the image if it's a lower strength. At higher strengths, it's going to start moving some things on its own and start fixing some of that stuff. In this case, I would say it kind of missed one of these windows down here. At least my mind expects there to be a window down there. And at the highest strength, this is really reimagining this quite a lot. We can see a lot of the core structure of the image is still there. There's a pool here, there's like windows, but it is truly changing this to a much different style and structure because that strength has gotten placed a lot higher. Now, the quality is great, of course, and we can kind of see that as we go from the default SDXL image to the higher strength iterations on it, more of the details start to just like make more sense and look cleaner until we get the highest strength. We lose a lot of our structure there, which is going to be solved by tools like ControlNet once those are released with Flux. Timing there is looking like probably within the next week or so, we'll have those control nets in place for the control canvas. But effectively what we're looking at here is just the raw power of image to image when you're using Flux and kind of the way it can add some of these details. And something that I particularly like about this, if you look at like lower strength generations, there's kind of like, I don't know, it looks like a cheap event hall inside, you know, it's kind of like a yellowish light, white tablecloth. It's just kind of like looks lame on the inside. Once we get up to like the super high strength Flux, this becomes a really convincing reflection of kind of like the, where we're taking the photo from, right? Which is like the deserts behind us in this. It just looks really cool to have that type of reflection on the top windows and the bottom windows. It comes across as like really, really high fidelity, and that makes for a very convincing image, which is cool. Yeah, I think this is like a pretty decent result for this. Now, personally, probably want to see more something like this, just because this is kind of more of the core structure that we had before. And this is where I'll get into fiddling with some of the details here. We're going to do the same trick we did before and hide the stuff below so that we can get exactly what we want out of this. And all I'm doing is going to try to get one of these windows and kind of move it out. I just took a little bit off there, the corner. Haste is not our friend here. So we're going to do that and get rid of this and that on the side. And then we'll turn off everything below and we'll just move this. It's the wrong layer. This over here and see what we can do to clean this up. That. And maybe brush in some black here where the window would be. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to inpaint this area. And we can leave the strength somewhat high. We'll do 0.5 and 0.7. And this time we're just fixing this one area, right? So we're not reimagining the whole thing. We're kind of just fixing this one spot in the image. Seemingly might be too high strength, so we might want to do 0.35 here too. Simply because I'm looking at it and it's already kind of like changed the structure here. Although it's not bad, it has like its own concept of what that might look like. This is actually the higher strength one, and you can see that it has that, it's kind of gotten that symmetrical look in on its own, kind of like imagined that in there, which is helpful. So yeah, somebody else cited that they're running into Discord issues. I think that's what we've seen is that a number of people today are running into Discord issues, including myself. Some people can see what's going on and some people can't. That's just going to be a Discord issue. I don't know what's going on with Discord right now. Somebody asked the question, when the work on inpainting is over, how can we get the metadata like on the choice of gallery? That metadata is not saved right now, but we're looking into how that might be at some point in the future. This was the generation that was like high strength. This was the one that was 0.5, and I think this one was the lower strength one. I could probably go for either of the high strength or low strength, but I think the high strength did a really good job of creating this as like an entry point. So we'll take that and accept it. And now we have a pretty decent image that kind of highlights the vibe and the aesthetic of this spot. We can obviously, if there's sections of this that we want to see alternatives for, let's say we want to take the top floor of this beautiful luxury hotel and have it regenerate a couple of options here. If we're doing big variations, we're going to switch that denoising strength up, and then we'll do maybe 3 iterations. And what that's going to do is we're effectively saying, give us a sizable variation on that area. That gives us a piece of this that is useful. It helps us kind of evaluate what options might exist, and we can kind of use the prompt as another way to do it. So if we wanted to prompt one with like beautiful balcony, another one with like you know, I don't know, a pool slide off of the second floor, you know, we can certainly try all of those things. I am kind of tempted to see if we can get a pool slide in, just because I said it. But I think this is a really cool way to take the pieces that are generated that you like and use this as kind of an iterative concepting tool, especially kind of like finding the parts and pieces that you want to change and in influencing those in meaningful ways directly on the canvas. Someone asked the question, got any tips for humans or animals for realism? I often see plasticky images. Is that specifically with something like Flux, or what model are you using? The answer to that question is you use a model that's trained on generating the type of thing that you want to generate. So if you're trying to generate animals and people for realism, there are a lot of models that generate really high quality photography. And those would be what you want to use. The other piece is make sure that you are using the tools on the canvas to really get kind of in and add in some of those details, because that will help. So we can see here that we've got a couple of different options. This one's very clean. It's got some like glass that looks nice. That is kind of like a balcony. All of these are cool. I like this one the best, and so I'll accept that one. And you can see, like, you know, we've got a couple of different flavors of this. If you wanted to, you could save each of those iterations out to the gallery and have all of them. So you don't have to just like, you know, commit to one. But you do have to commit one to the canvas if you want to start iterating on it and editing it further. Now, as our kind of finale, I'll just try to add in a slide, because I cited that as like my my challenge to myself. And we'll see if I can get it to generate a slide. I think it might be kind of hard, but you know, that's what's fun about all this. I need to actually do this on the top layer here. So put this here, and then we're gonna do kind of some water coming out of this. Who knows if this is gonna work? This is truly just like pure entertainment for me. Trying to get like the inside of this it's like tunnel, the slide tunnel. Okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna inpaint this. And we're gonna say a luxury hotel exterior with a water slide. A large black water slide going into the pool. We can give that a shot. We'll see what happens if I do a high strength and then a lower strength iteration on that. The higher strength is going to ignore more of my drawing, but it might figure it out just based on placement. Ooh, it's not like the tube water slide, but it is just it's a cool looking water slide. Placement is kind of shallow for that. Kind of dangerous looking. Unless this is going straight into the deep end. I think probably not up to code. But it does look like it's getting a water slide in there. And then this one's the lower strength water slide, which is not doing exactly what I imagined it doing. Higher strength probably going to look better. But it's doing its best to interpret my like rough coloring as a slide, which is appreciated. Yeah, this one's definitely like the better water slide. So we got a water slide in there. That looks good now. For a bad drawing, it looks pretty good. We can probably iterate on that again if we wanted to, just to get like a little bit more. Another thing I could do is if I like the water slide, but its placement is suspect, as always, we can kind of move it around using the layer and kind of pull that down and get that placed in a better, safer spot for our guests. But now we know what a slide looks like in this water park. Somewhat of an interesting slide. But we'll take that and we'll move it a little bit down here and then erase those parts and pieces that we don't like. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the old image and the initial drawing. So now I've just got my new water slide here, and I can inpaint just that. And then that'll be in its proper spot. Someone said, could inpaint the pool to get ripples from the water slide. We could do that. Someone else said, if you want to paint a dolphin in the pool locally, how do you do it? It's a new prompt focus. It tries to move all the concepts into the tiny space. Yeah, so you're going to have to figure out a way that it kind of like fits with the broader image. I would say my guess is if this was going to look like anything like a real image. So I'm going to do this again. I'm just going to regenerate this with the entirety of the pool, just so that we can see what that looks like, and see if it has how it affects the water surface. This is probably going to be somewhat difficult to get a dolphin rendered into, because I don't know how well it's going to understand I want the dolphin to be underneath and in the pool. See, I actually like the water ripples here better than when I did the whole thing. This does look kind of like a more proper slide. This is kind of like a playground slide, and this one has that kind of like protection on the top, so we'll take it anyways. We'll try to add in a dolphin here. Give the people what they want. So we'll kind of like do this. I think what I'm going to do though is I'm going to use lower opacity, and that will just give me a little bit more of like the color underneath the water. I'm going to bring this down to focus in on this area, and we're going to inpaint just that piece here, and we're going to try to figure out how to get it to show that. Luxury hotel exterior with a dolphin swimming in the pool. We're going to give it a shot, and I'll answer some questions that I've seen come in. On that note, for people with slower GPUs, I see you're keeping the bounding box big and only adding on to the prompt you have. How would you have done it if you lowered the bounding box? If you lower the bounding box, it's not making it better on your GPU for whatever it's worth. It's scaling that. So it's still doing a full generation even when it's small. And in this case, you can see that we've got this like distorted Dolphin that's now coming out. We'll try to like raise up the strength a little bit. The thing that we're focusing on here, though, is we're trying to figure out how to make this make sense given the context of what's inside the bounding box. In this case, because I don't have the slide inside of the visual, I'm not using that in the prompt. I'm basically trying to only describe what's inside the boundary of this box. That's what I want my prompt to be. And that is ultimately what I'm getting here. And, you know, we got a Dolphin. Probably look a little bit better. And I realized that I outpainted here on accident as well. We'll do another generation with that Dolphin, now that it's kind of like better drawn and more well understood, and see if we get anything that looks a little bit more like it's submerged. I think the reality here is it probably has never seen a dolphin in a swimming pool. So it's kind of trying to make it look, trying to make it work, but it might struggle to really make it look like photorealistic in the sense that we're expecting. But it could get close. It kind of just looks a little bit more like it's coming outside the pool in a way that doesn't really make sense. But you know, we did what you asked for. We got a dolphin in here, and you can see how I would do it, right? So I brought the scope down to the smaller region. I'm focusing just on the dolphin, and it is there. That one probably looks like the most like a dolphin. Now what we could do is we could see if maybe the context of the pool itself will give it a little bit more fidelity with what we're looking for. So we're going to try that here. I'm pulling this back out, and we'll do kind of as it's in the context of this like hotel swimming pool, seeing if that changes it. When you get really close with the bounding box, sometimes you can get an interesting effect where, because that's the only thing the model is looking at, it almost like it tries to create like a portrait of it. It's trying to create like an image that would make sense if that was the only thing you were looking at, where it's not really like the main object. It's you're trying to fit it into a broader thing. I think the Dolphin obviously looks better from the original generation, but when you zoom out, you can see that it looks a little bit less like it's the main focus, right? And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is when we generated this close up, the model is effectively trying to generate an image that would make sense if that were the only thing you're looking at. You don't want to look at like a background image of a dolphin and where it's not highlighted and it's not very aesthetic. And so that's not what it's going to generate if you're that close. When we generate this far out, there's a lot more that could be the highlight of this image. And so the generation gives it a much more kind of like muted look. It's a little bit less pronounced. It looks a little bit more like it's not the main thing of the image, right? And I think that's typically what you'll see depending on where you're zoomed in and how far you're zoomed in. I'm generating one more time just to see if this like continues to improve towards looking like it's swimming in the pool rather than like outside of it. Again, within the context of the broader hotel swimming pool. But you can see it's kind of like still like floating on top of this pool. It's difficult to have it like actually swimming inside of the pool in this context. But we'll take it. Actually, no, we won't. We'll undo that. We'll keep our little flying guy. He just came out the slide. Okay, cool. I think we're at time. Apologies again for folks who ran into Discord issues. We will see if we need to like reevaluate where and how we host the studio session so that people aren't lost in this regard. We'll evaluate our options and see what we can do. But we will upload this to YouTube so you all can see everything. If you all have questions that you didn't get answered because you weren't able to attend live, do feel free to shoot it in the YouTube comments and we'll try to get them, or shoot it to us on Discord and we'll get to those. But we'll see you all next time. Thanks again for